New Year's Eve was supposed to be a night of fun, a fresh start. I was heading to a party at my friend Nate's cabin, a tradition we'd kept for years. He always invited a big crowd, drinks, music, fireworks at midnight. I was looking forward to it. The cabin was deep in the woods, far from the city lights. The kind of place where your phone's signal disappears, and the roads are so empty it feels like you're the last person on Earth. I had driven that route before, but something about that night felt off. It wasn't the weather, though it was colder than usual. It wasn't even the silence, though the woods felt too quiet, like the trees were holding their breath. It was something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. I was about 15 minutes away when I saw her, a woman standing on the side of the road, just past the bend. She was still, almost too still, like a statue placed there on purpose. The first thing I noticed was a dress, long, pale, almost glowing in my headlights. I slowed down, not because I wanted to stop, but because my body acted before my brain could tell it not to. She wasn't looking at me. Her head was slightly tilted downward, her hair covering most of her face. Something about the way she stood, arms at her sides, feet bare against the frozen ground, made my skin crawl. I hesitated. Should I roll down my window? Ask if she needed help? Then she moved. Not a step, not a wave, just her head. She lifted it ever so slightly, just enough for me to see her eyes through the curtain of hair. I don't know how to describe them. Hello. Wrong. I hit the gas. As my car sped past her, my heart pounded in my ears. I forced myself not to look in the mirror. Don't look back. Don't look back. But I did, and she was gone. Not walking, not running, just gone. The rest of the drive to Nate's cabin was a blur. By the time I pulled up to the party, I had almost convinced myself I imagined the whole thing. Almost, but as I stepped out of my car and felt the warmth of the cabin lights on my face, I made the mistake of glancing down. There, by my back tire, was a single, wet footprint. I froze. It wasn't possible. The road was dry. I hadn't driven through any puddles, and yet there it was, a single, wet footprint. Big, small, like someone had stepped out of the darkness and placed it there just for me to see. I forced a laugh under my breath, shaking off the unease creeping up my spine. Maybe I was just seeing things. Maybe it was nothing. The sound of voices and music from inside the cabin pulled me back to reality. I wasn't about to let some weird roadside hallucination ruin my night. I stepped over the footprint and headed inside. The cabin was packed. People were already drinking, talking over each other, laughing like the world outside didn't exist. Nate spotted me from across the room and raised his drink. Finally, thought you died out there. I smiled, forcing myself to shake off whatever I was feeling. Nah, just got held up. I didn't mention the woman. I didn't mention the footprint. I should have. The night went on as expected. Loud music, too much beer, people counting down to midnight like it actually meant something. For a while, I managed to forget. I convinced myself that whatever I saw was just a trick of the light, my imagination running wild. But then the power cut out. It happened suddenly, right in the middle of someone's drunk speech about New Year's resolutions. 1 second, the room was full of light and sound. The next, nothing. Total darkness. The music stopped. The chatter died instantly. Someone cursed, laughing nervously. Nate, man, you forgot to pay the bill. Nate groaned. Relax, the generator probably just needs a second. People fumbled for their phones, screens lighting up the room in patches of dim, bluish glow. Someone near the window pulled back the curtain to check outside. That's when I heard it. A knock. Soft. Barely there. It came from the front door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My stomach turned to ice. Nate raised an eyebrow, glancing at me. You expecting someone else? I shook my head. No one moved. The knocks came again. 3 soft taps against the wood. Someone chuckled nervously. Probably just Trevor messing with us. Trevor's in the kitchen, someone else mumbled. Silence. I swallowed hard, stepping forward before I could talk myself out of it. I'll check. I reached for the doorknob, pulse hammering in my throat. I didn't know what I expected to see. A drunk party crasher? A lost hiker? But when I pulled the door open, there was nothing. Just a dark forest. No footprints on the porch. No sign that anyone had been there. Just the wind whispering through the trees. And then, the power flickered back on. Every light in the cabin blazed to life, music blasting through the speakers like nothing had happened. Laughter filled the space again, people shaking off the tension like it had just been a weird coincidence. But as I stood in the doorway, staring out into the empty woods, I knew better. I stepped back inside, shutting the door behind me. And that's when I noticed the single, wet footprint was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the party started winding down, after people crashed on couches or left in pairs, I lay awake on a makeshift bed in the corner of the cabin, staring at the ceiling. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I kept telling myself I imagined the knocks, that the power outage was just bad timing, that I was making something out of nothing. But my gut wouldn't let it go. Sometime around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep. I got up, careful not to wake anyone, and stepped outside onto the porch. The night was still, too still. The snow-covered trees stood motionless, not even a breeze stirring the branches. The cold bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. I was too focused on the feeling that I wasn't alone. I scanned the woods, expecting to see something, anything, out of place. But the only thing out here was me. And then I looked at my car. The windshield was fogged up from the cold, but I could see something. A smudge, a shape. I stepped closer, every hair on my body standing on end. A handprint, small, too small, pressed against the inside of the glass. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. That wasn't possible. I had locked the car. No one had been inside. A sudden rustling in the trees made me spin around. My eyes darted between the branches, but I saw nothing. I was done. I rushed back inside, locking the door behind me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that in the morning, everything would make sense. But when I finally managed to sleep, I had the worst dream of my life. I was standing in the middle of the woods. The trees around me stretched impossibly high, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. I could hear something behind me, soft footsteps crunching through the snow. I turned. She was there, the woman from the road. Only now, I could see her face. And she was smiling, but her mouth was too wide. Her teeth were too sharp. And her eyes were mine. I woke up gasping, my heart slamming against my ribs. The room was dark, silent, but as I lay there, trying to convince myself it was just a dream, I heard it again. 3 soft knocks. This time, they came from a window. Morning came too quickly. I must have dozed off at some point, but it didn't feel like real sleep. More like my body had shut down from exhaustion. The fire had burned low, leaving only a soft, pulsing glow in the dim room. My head ached. My throat was dry. For a moment, I almost convinced myself that last night had been a bad dream. Almost, but the uneasy silence in the cabin told me otherwise. Nate and the others were still asleep, sprawled out on the couches and floor, their breathing slow and steady. I didn't wake them. Instead, I moved quietly, grabbing my jacket and stepping outside into the cold morning air. The forest was still. No wind, no birds, just the distant creak of tree branches shifting under the weight of frost. I inhaled sharply, trying to clear my head. The night before played on repeat in my mind, the whisper, the shadow behind me, the knocking. I had to leave. I fumbled for my keys in my pocket, walking over to my car. It sat exactly where I left it, a thin layer of frost covering the windshield. Everything seemed normal, until I got closer. My breath caught in my throat. All 4 tires were slashed, not just punctured, shredded. Deep, jagged gashes ran along the rubber, like someone had dragged a knife through them over and over. I swallowed hard. My pulse quickened. No, 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 no. I turned back toward the cabin, about to shout for Nate. And then I saw them, footprints, leading from the woods. There. They stopped right behind my car. And then they vanished, like whoever made them had just disappeared into thin air. I stood there, my breath fogging in the freezing air, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. I hadn't imagined it. This was real. And whatever it wasn't done with me yet. I wasn't staying another minute. The moment Nate and the others woke up, I told them what happened. Nobody laughed. Nobody cracked a joke. The look in my eyes must have told them everything they needed to know. Nate helped me patch the tires up the best we could. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it would get me back to town. That's all I needed. I just wanted to be away from that place. By noon, I was back on the road. The trees blurred past as I drove, my hands gripping the wheel too tight. The radio was off. No music, no distractions, just the steady hum of the engine and the crunch of my tires against the frozen asphalt. I kept checking the rearview mirror. There was nothing. No footprints. No shadowy figure. Just an empty road stretching behind me. For the first time in hours, I let myself breathe. And then my car stopped. Not sputtered. Not slowed down. Just stopped. Like something had cut the power completely. I swore under my breath, fumbling with the keys. Turning them over. Nothing. Not even a flicker of life from the engine. That's when I felt it. The air changed, like I wasn't alone. I swallowed hard, slowly looking up, and she was standing in front of my car. Not on the side of the road this time. Not in the distance. Right in front of me. Her hair hung in damp, tangled strands over her face, her body unnaturally still. Her dress, soaked, dark streaks ran down her arms and legs like she had been standing in the rain for days. Except there was no rain. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, too soft, like a whisper cutting through glass. "Can you see me?" My throat closed up. "I can see you." And then she laughed. Not a chuckle, not a giggle. A full, shrieking, hysterical laugh that echoed through the empty road, bouncing off the trees surrounding me. And then she ran. Straight at me. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I threw the door open and ran. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. My boots pounded against the frozen ground, slipping, sliding. But I kept going. Behind me, her laughter followed, shrieking, twisting, getting closer. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The only thought in my head was Nate's cabin. If I could just get back there, if I could just make it to the light. Then I tripped. My foot caught on something. Roots? Ice? I don't know. I hit the ground hard, my hand scraping against frozen dirt. Pain shot up my leg, but I barely felt it, because suddenly everything was silent. No footsteps, no laughter, just nothing. I forced myself to look up. She wasn't there. The road was empty, but I knew better. I scrambled to my feet and kept running. My breath came in ragged gasps as I reached the clearing, the cabin. I slammed on the door. "Nate, open up." The door swung open, and Nate barely had time to react before I stumbled inside. I turned, expecting to see her standing at the tree line, but she was gone. The night stretched out behind me, calm, empty, like nothing had ever happened. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Nate. Neither did anyone else. When I told them everything, I could see it in their faces. They believed me. Nobody joked. Nobody told me I was crazy. By morning, I got a tow truck to take my car. I wasn't driving back alone. As I packed my things, Nate pulled me aside. His face was pale. "There's something you should know," he said. I braced myself. A few years ago, someone died on that road. A woman hit by a car. They say the driver never stopped, just left her there in the cold. And ever since then, people have seen her, standing on the side of the road, waiting, watching. Some say she's looking for the one who left her to die. Others say she's just looking for someone else to take their place. I don't know what I believe, but I know one thing. When I left Nate's cabin, I didn't look in the rearview mirror, and I never took that road again.